Thank you everyone for coming to the roundtable discussion on how to succeed in college. My name is Aya Kimura, and I'm a sociology department professor, and I will be moderating tonight's discussion. Before we get started, a couple of reminders. First, we welcome your questions, but we would like your questions to be in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And Alena, Shalaby, who is helping us run this webinar, will be curating the questions. And second, I wanted to remind everyone that this is being recorded and we'll be posting the video on the department's website or the college website or social media. All right, so sociology department is very interested in helping students pursue their degrees and dreams. And we hope that this roundtable discussion will be helpful for the students to navigate their time in college and make the best use out of their time during the undergraduate studies. Now, let me introduce our speakers today. First speaker is Jason Alexander, who is a graduate student in the Department of Sociology. And second speaker is Clarice Handoko, who is also a graduate student in the Department of Sociology. And the third speaker is Dr. Ashley Rubin, who is an associate professor of sociology at the university. So without further ado, let me invite Jason to share his wisdom on how to succeed and thrive in college. So go for it, Jason.
Good morning. Is what I would say if we were in another time zone, but it might be the morning where you're watching it now. But thank you for those who are here and for those who are watching to listen and learn some information, hopefully. So one of the important aspects that we're going to talk about is basic needs, as the university is still kind of unpredictable in how it's shifting through online and in-person learning, and then just any interaction in general. Because when I went to undergraduate classes, that was back in 2013 to 2017. So that was way before pandemic stuff. And I was totally in person. But now it seems like there are a lot of different pressures and a lot of distractions and a lot of different stressful things to negotiate. So I'll be trying to help with some of those. And then afterwards, Clarice and Professor Rubin can talk more about specific academic skills. So one of the important things that I'd like to emphasize up front is that in our sociology department, and hopefully in the other departments on campus, we are excited to and happy to help you succeed in whatever way you define succeed or success. And to me, it seems like this is not really a competitive environment where like comparing grades and being like, oh, we gotta get all A's or we're gonna never get a job. That's not the case. You can still recover future dreams and keep aspirations and hopes alive, and we will help you to do that as we can. But the important thing is you need to let us know if you need help. Especially if we just have online classes with you, faculty and teaching assistants, we can help you, but we need to know that you have a specific issue that you need assistance with, especially if you're first in your family to attend university, or you came from community college system and then transferred into here, or other international learning systems that you came from. There's a lot of different basics or fundamental things that other students might have already learned, but you might also have trouble with them. But that's not something to feel ashamed about. It's just the different layout of skill sets, and you might have a variety of talents and skills, and then everyone has their own weak points in different places. So important thing is to, especially when you get to like second, third, and definitely by fourth year, as class sizes get smaller, ideally class size of 10 people would be super great for getting to know each other in a class. but it's really important for you to try and get to know your favorite professors and develop a connection and relationship with them respectfully and healthfully, of course. And if you have issues with any particular professors, then you can seek out help about dealing with harassment or any other issues that might come up potentially, but that's hopefully won't happen. But an important thing for getting to know your professors and then even graduate students who are assisting with the classes is that recommendation letters are going to be very important in your career futures, wherever you go, if it's to grad school, graduate school, like master's or PhD. Professors can give you recommendation letters when you complete, and then you can use it later on. And then otherwise for jobs, they might know connections in the field that you're going into. And otherwise, just knowing your professor or your teachers in any case is a good way to like be motivated and have a feeling of support. So one of the resources that I'm going to share now is the UH Basic Needs website. I think this is linked in Laulima on the front page at many times, but one of the important things about this is that it covers all the campuses for one. And for UHM in particular, where sociology is, if you go to resources and then go down to UH Manoa, you're going to find some categories of types of resources. So food assistance, things like if you need SNAP, which is if you're below a certain level of income per month, then you can apply for this and it gives you extra money to use on food, which is very doable. Like the threshold for getting into that is not as high as you might expect it. So you can apply for that if you or also your family is needing help with food in general. Financial help, I think we're going to talk about that also a bit later with scholarships, health services on campus or off campus. And I heard just recently LGBTQ Plus Center Lounge just opened up for in-person lounging or a consultation about that. We also have housing and then a variety of other off-campus organizations and such that are helping. But then I also just found out if you go to the findhelp.org link here, then that'll lead you to this site. Then you enter in your zip code, which for UHM is 96848. And then it's going to bring up a lot of resources that you can use for separate categories like health, money, care, food also, because food is very important. And hopefully the number of events on campus that offer free food is going to increase over time. And if you find lectures or like lunchtime lectures that have free food, then that's also really fun to go to and have a casual interaction with guest speakers or speakers from UHM. And you can go with your friends and hang out and learn while nourishing your curiosity and your body as well. So this is this site, and you can check out all of these if you need specifics, especially on campus. If you need something like maternity leave or other types of family care resources, those are also here. Otherwise, when talking about health, there are, of course, a lot of stressful things going on campus with your own classes, and then trying to pay tuition, and the needs for each person vary on each person, of course. But for me, I found it really useful to find creative outlets by joining clubs that were creative and not thinking based in a particular way. And I actually got over involved when I was in my undergrad program, and it was doing like dance, singing, theater all at once, and then it was all kind of crazy. So also, if you are getting into a lot of clubs and organizations, you should know that it's also fine to say no to requests, so that you don't become over involved, and then you can keep your focus on like what your main dreams are and also graduating. But you can also say yes to a lot of things and then explore the opportunities that come to you. Like, for example, the weekly emails that you might probably be getting through the College of Social Sciences Access email list that has updates about like internships as you're planning for the summer. And there's a lot of opportunities that just come up, not necessarily regularly, but they might come up unpredictably, and you might be like, oh, let's try and figure that out. But you can also consult with like teaching assistants or other people if you want specific advice on any topics, especially as you're like getting to third year and fourth year and trying to plan out your schedules while searching for job options and things. Also, I heard one student yesterday say very firmly that Zoom is boring. And that is also a sentiment that many people are feeling compared to in person. But we're also recognizing that some people are like commuting from Iowa or farther away and driving through a lot of traffic and then getting here. And then they need to go to class in a classroom. Then in the same day, they also have to switch to an online class, and they have to switch back to in person. And they also have to find food somewhere and also get like quiet places to study. And maybe they also probably have like a job on top of that. So more than like pre-pandemic times, now it seems like it's very easy to lose track of things because you're switching between in-person interactions with people and then online, probably less easy to do interactions through Zoom and other things. And part of that involves checking email a lot to keep up, which can be really annoying. But email is basically the main tool that is like the backup and then also the fundamental way to communicate about classes and then anything else. So you kind of do need to check that a lot. But you can use any way of planning out your schedule on like physical calendars, online calendars. You can check in with your friends and meet up in specific places on campus and then walk across campus together, walk back and ride the bus and do all that sort of thing. And now as the middle of the semester, you should theoretically have some sort of routine built up, and routine of course makes things easier, but also just to let you know, semesters at this university are longer than they should be. Usually a lot of university semesters are like 15 weeks total, and this one's more than that, or 14 or 15. So it does require a lot of endurance, and that means you need to practice self-care in various ways that if you have your family or your kin that you relax with in downtime, that's a great way. But then if you don't have that kind of environment, then it's also very good to like get out in nature or intentionally put down your phone so that you stop doom scrolling and interact with real life things, touch grass, do all that sort of thing. Another thing that also wanted to check here as a site, if you are looking for jobs and you don't want like a job off campus, just making sure that you know about the on-campus part-time job site, SECE. You can get to here through my UH portal, of course. And this is ranked in order of new arrivals, but you see there's a lot of different, maybe interesting, maybe less interesting opportunities that come up throughout the semester. And some of these can be research related, like teaching assistant 401. That's probably more intensive than like being a teaching assistant for a 100 level, but you don't need to be a graduate student to do some sort of academic related job like this, speaking to a mentor, Micronesian. And you can also filter this for on-campus, off-campus special classifications. I'm also aware that if you're an international student, then your options are thus more limited. So it's also good to check in with other students and figure out what is available and keep your ears and eyes open for opportunities because they do exist, and we'll be here to help you get through it healthily and hopefully in a way that you hope to graduate, but then maybe even better situation than you imagined could happen after you graduate. So just keep endurance up and find the outlets for keeping through together.
Thanks, Jason. Endurance it is. We need that, right? Long semester, but thanks for the helpful tips. So Clarice, floor is yours.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Kimura, and thank you very much, Jason. I think among us graduate students, Jason is kind of our like resource toolbox. So I'm sure he is one of those people you can definitely approach if you ever need help in the department and beyond. I think I'd like to kind of share my experience as an undergrad, as somebody who's not exactly from here. So I moved here from Singapore and I was born in Indonesia. And so my undergraduate college experience is very much in a Singapore context, but I do hope that some of the tips I have for you do translate to the UH experience. So just to give you some context, in Singapore, we don't really have all that many colleges to choose from if you decide to go local. And I think some of you who grew up here, you might feel the same way. And in a way, it's kind of interesting because you spend another 4 years so close to home. And then the question comes up, like, what do I do? What major do I take? And I think a lot of you who might be sociology students are in your second, third, and fourth year, and you're still grappling with that question of, why am I doing sociology? What can I do with sociology? And if you have parents who might be questioning you that as well, I'm here to tell you that you're not alone. A little fun fact was that my parents are kind of the very typical Asian tiger parents, and for the longest time, they really hoped that I would have a doctor in my name at some point. And so medical school was always the trajectory, but then I decided to go to sociology, and they thought that I was going to be that manual laborer girl at art show exhibits. That's what a sociology degree gets you. And so for my 4 years of undergraduate studies, every other month I come back home, they would be like, oh, all right, are you ready to transfer to medical school now? And I was like, no, parents, I'm in my year 3. I'm pretty much set that this is what I'm gonna do. And I think it took a lot of convincing, and I think I really tried to show them that I find great meaning in this, and I understand that it's not easy to come by, finding the reason why you are deciding to choose sociology. And my general tip for you is that when you find that kind of reason why you find it's meaningful, it will motivate you to make your 4 years, your minimum 4 years here at UH a meaningful one. So just to give you some ideas, I know some of you, I have great respect for those of you who are working jobs while you're trying to go through your undergraduate degree. Many of you are first generation college going students, and you are a pioneering generation in your family. And I hope that you would take some of those experiences, from home and from your workplaces, and kind of have that curiosity to understand the things that are going on around you. I hope that you see that sociology is an avenue for you to explore some of the problems you see at work, some of the struggles that you see at home. And so this could be a meaningful kind of like lab for you to think out loud, think with your professors, think with your friends. And, it might take some work from you to pinpoint exactly what kind of courses will get you that kind of takeaway. But I think it really helps to kind of sit down at the start of every semester and question, like, what am I interested in these days? To give you an example, for me, I was working in the art scene a lot. So I was working with the National Arts Festival. I've been singing some jazz in the different jazz clubs in Singapore since I was 15. And so I was always very intrigued with how jazz musicians work. I was also very intrigued in how, like the bureaucracy of the National Arts Council in Singapore. And I just wanted to find answers. And I found that when I was picking my major at the National University of Singapore, it felt like sociology could give me that kind of answer. And I definitely don't mean to say that in year 1, I'm like, I'm going to be a sociology major, and I know exactly what I'm going to get out of this. But it is kind of having that open-mindedness to the different perspectives that your professors might give, the different readings you might do, and having that motivation to try and apply it to yourself, your personal life. I think that's going to help you gain more meaning out of the papers that you're going to write, the readings, the many, many pages you're going to read. And I think that helps, you know, in the larger story that Jason, or the larger tip that Jason was talking about, endurance. I think having something to work towards is really going to help you with your endurance in your time here. And the second thing I would like to talk about is perhaps something that people try to shy away from. I noticed that, and I personally felt this as well. The big scary monster called writing essays. I think I feel it. I have felt it as an undergrad. I have felt it. I am feeling it as a graduate student. But I would like to share some tips of how to think about writing that will make it less scary. Kind of in line with my first point that, you know, you want to try and apply what you're reading to your personal life, to the people, and the different environments around you. I hope that you would take writing as a process of learning how to articulate your ideas. It is not a paper where you're trying to get an A+. It is not a competition. And professors and TAs we're not out here to, you know, like tell you off or give you bad grades or really judge you overly critically, but we just want to see you grow as a person who is able to communicate better and better from your first year in college, and as you progress to your second, third, and fourth year. And I think I might be a little biased. I have been a sociology major through and through. I know some of you might be from different social sciences, but I think this is kind of the core of the social sciences and how we write essays. It is that exercise of trying to be a better communicator. And so if I can kind of give you an idea of how you have already been writing good essays, except maybe not on paper, I see that in our 300, our 400 level courses. I think a lot of our professors try to interact with students more and get you to think about, you know, what is this particular topic, the theories, how can you see them in your personal life? In the class discussions, you're essentially learning how to articulate. And I hope you take that same level of calm when you write the paper. You're essentially trying to think out loud on paper. And so it's not all that scary, I think. And if there is a challenge, it's perhaps trying to open and expand your horizons. Like what I said earlier, sociology helps you to see different angles to a single phenomenon, you know, like the fast food chain worker. How can you see it from different perspectives? I think that's what you want to challenge yourselves to get across on paper. And that said, though, writing is not something you achieve miraculously overnight. I believe even Jason and myself, you know, we can safely say that we are still learning how to be better writers. But I hope that as an undergrad, you are going to be patient with yourself and you would find joy in the writing process and see that this is going to make you a much, much better person when you step out of college. So yeah, that's a little bit about writing, and I'm very happy to give more writing tips. I'm sure the professors are too, if you ever need that kind of help. The last thing I just want to say is kind of like a more general life tip. And I think it comes with age, or maybe not age, but the experience of having finished college and gone on to some sort of working environment and having that kind of hindsight to look back at my undergraduate years. I find that I really cherished my undergraduate years because I got to do things that I would never get to do ever again once I step out of college. You know, when you go on to work your 9-to-5 jobs, it might be a mundane one, it might be a fulfilling one, but some of the things that you get to do in undergraduate college and an undergraduate degree, it's really like an experimental time for you to find yourself and discover yourself, whether it's in terms of the different interests you're going to take into your workplaces, whether it's about the things you're going to write, and maybe sometimes you don't know. So coming back to that point of curiosity, you know, it's about taking courses that maybe you might not have taken, like a Bahasa Indonesia class or taking a gamelan class, you know, like I think you don't have to be so set on clearing your different core requirements. I think at UH here, from a general observation, it seems like, as Jason said, people are really, really willing to help. And there are resources out there. I do not deny that there's a big bureaucratic process to maybe applying for a research project grants, to getting study abroad experiences. But at the end of the day, it is there. And I hope you will cherish it. In some ways, I am here at UH because of some of the opportunities I had as an undergraduate. In NUS, I first went, I just happened to scroll through the summer exchange programs, and I found a summer exchange program that was for free to the Hokkaido University, and I managed to do like a course or two on anthropology and museum studies. I met a couple of professors, and they were from UH, and now here I am. So you see, it all kind of links together, and I think don't be so hard up about, you know, like finishing a degree and getting good grades. There is something larger to the experience here, and if you ever get lost, as Jason said, please feel free to talk to us. I am completely with Jason and his student that mentioned to him that Zoom is hard and we are so over Zoom. I know some of you are dying for human interaction. Please feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, I look forward to any questions and any other things you might like to discuss about. So I'm gonna hand the time back to Dr. Kimura.
Thank you, Clarice. These are great. Open-mindedness, open for serendipity, and also about the writing. You know, I, as a faculty member, I'm also learning to write. So it's a lifelong process of trying to improve the writing, definitely. So thank you. Dr. Rubin, the floor is yours.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, first I want to echo Jason on the importance of doing self-care and finding a way to take care of yourself so that you can succeed in school, because you can't succeed in school, you know, if you're burned out and your body is struggling, your mind is struggling. I also want to echo Clarice on the importance of finding meaning in your work, your classes, your major. Basically, the tips I'm going to offer are like very nuts and bolts, pragmatic about how to succeed in the classroom. But basically, these tips aren't going to work, especially over the long term, if you're burned out. And burnout is super real. As somebody who completely burned out in the second half of my third year in undergrad, and that wasn't during a pandemic, it wasn't during World War III, it wasn't during any number of terrible things that are happening right now. So I just want to kind of preface my comments by saying that like basically these tips are meaningless if you're struggling with burnout. So the first tip I want to say is go to office hours. So what are office hours? Your professors are required to be available to you for about 1 to 2 hours a week outside of the classroom. Sometimes these are pre-scheduled, for example, 1 to 3 on Tuesdays. Sometimes they're by appointment where you email the professor and say, hey, would you be available, more politely than, hey, dear professor, would you be available to meet with me for office hours? And some professors have both options. And these, of course, can be in person, on Zoom, or some mixture of these. And so office hours are supposed to be a time where you can ask the professor questions about the material that you're covering in class, or more generally, just to discuss the material because you find it interesting or confusing or exciting or terrifying. In practice, many professors are also happy to have students come to their office hours to discuss grad school, law school, life after college, research. We love to talk about research because we were epic nerds, and research is why many of us got into this job in the first place. We're also happy to talk about how we got into our subject matter, as well as any other topic. I literally once discussed cheese and tea with a student because that's what they wanted to discuss. It's a little extreme, but I'll talk about whatever. We eventually circle back to something related to the class, but even if not, the student gets space time with the professor, which is really important for them. And I get to know more about my students, which is really important for me. It helps me to kind of tailor my classes and just get to know my students and have a better sense of who they are and what they're dealing with. And I want to say in general, professors aren't as scary in office hours as they are in lecture, especially a large lecture. I literally had a student tell me, oh, wow, you're not nearly as scary as you are in lecture. So I know this for a fact. And it helps to remember that a lot of us are shy and awkward in real life. And so for us, it might be easier to lecture and kind of sound like all authoritative. And it can be harder for us to carry on a conversation because we are shy and awkward. It's not because we don't like you. It's just that many of us are really big nerds. So just keep that in mind. Like, it might be awkward, but you can get over that. That's fine. Office hours are also great because if you do need a letter of recommendation, it's much easier for us to write you one if we know who you are, and we can put a face to the name, or a name to the personality or something. So if we've seen you virtually or in person in office hours, that makes our job a lot easier. We can write you a better letter of recommendation. So it's not just so-and-so got such and such grade in our class and they seem to be a good student. We want something more that we can say. And so office hours is a great time to do that. Along these lines, it's great to get involved in faculty sponsored research. So if you don't know about it, UROP, the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program, is a fantastic program on campus where you basically apply for funds and then you get those funds directly as your salary. And you can also apply for like travel expenses, although maybe not during the pandemic, but you can apply for funding to print things out or to get tools to conduct your research. The deadlines for that every year are 10/10 and 3/3, so October 10th and March 3rd. So today was the deadline for the spring. So that's something that happens on a semesterly basis, and those are really great. You can also sign up to be a research assistant for a faculty member. So again, go to office hours or send your professor an email and say, hey, professor, again, more formally than that, do you have need for a research assistant? So that's something that you can do. And then some other sources of funding beyond research specific, ASUH has other funding that you can check out on their website. The Manoa Career Center has a list of scholarships and funding. There's also a scholarship page listed under the STAR website. Additionally, the UROP page itself actually has a whole list of other funding available for all sorts of things. And then finally, as Jason mentioned before, there's that funding for emergency needs if you're in need and need food and things like that are super important. And of course, if you need help finding these resources, reach out to us. We can help you find them. Okay, so the next big thing I want to say is please use the syllabus. It's a cliche that professors say, it's in the syllabus or read the syllabus. But I want to explain what that means and why, how we're putting these things together and what we expect you to take out of it. So as faculty, we're required to make this document and make it available on the first day of class. And that's basically our contract with you for the semester. It's what we expect of you and it's what you can expect of us. So that's the syllabus. A lot of it actually is boilerplate that we're just required to include as members of the university. There's just stuff that they tell us to put in there. So it will be in all the syllabi. So you really only have to read that stuff once. So you can skip over that once you've read it in one syllabus and just skip on to the unique stuff. So and you can remember to focus on the heading so you can remember to come back to that stuff. And then there's other stuff that we include, like what happens if you get sick and need to figure out what to do about missing class. We each have different kind of policies and practices for what to do if you miss a class or an assignment, or makeup's available, is extra credit a thing, and that sort of thing. The most important part of a syllabus is the list of what's due when. So when you get your syllabus, and hopefully you read it in the first week of classes, you shouldn't just read it, but instead you should use the syllabus, by which I mean add any important dates to your calendar on day one. So as a student, for example, I might add in reminders like a week or two, or even a month before something like a midterm or a paper due date, so that I have that in there. So I don't have it sneak up on me and be like, oh my God, next week is the midterm. How did I not see that coming? Like the semester just flew past, because of course they always do. So using your calendar and reading your syllabus with your calendar with you is really important. The other thing that's really important is to read the professor's individual policies, those things that are unique to the professor, not set by the university. So these might include things like email etiquette, policies on late or missed work, whether attendance is required. My syllabi often have helpful policies designed to protect students so that, when bad things happen, you know what to do. But if students don't read the syllabus, then they don't know that they can benefit from these. And so a lot of times I'll have students at the very end of the semester, when they basically miss their chance, ask for these special, accommodations, but it was actually something that they needed to do earlier. And at this point, it's too late. The worst is when you get an email from a student during the exam week, when we literally can't accept more, graded assignments from them. And so at that point, our hands are tied. So read the syllabus, because that will have important information. So there are a couple of other things I want to say that are kind of nitty gritty. And I actually have a video on my website that has more of this information. So those two things are learn how to skim. So I know a lot of you are pressed for time. You're working 1 or 2 jobs. You have family caregiving responsibilities. You have other things going on. You're also just coping with everything that's going on. So sometimes, we understand you might have to skim the reading. And frankly, sometimes it's actually easier to skim the reading before you actually like do the whole reading itself. So either way, it's helpful to skim, by which I mean, you might like read the introductory paragraph of each section and then read the first line of every paragraph after that. There are kind of other ways of skimming, but that's just an example of something. So finding a way to kind of consume the material quickly so you get the overview of the reading, and then you can go back and look in a more detailed way. And so that's a really important skill to hone if you can. And of course, like if you're super pressed for time, at the very least, if you skim the reading, that's so much better than not doing the reading at all. So I always tell my students, if you really can't do the reading, please just skim the reading because that's just infinitely better. The other thing is, if you can, take notes on your required readings and definitely on the course lectures. I've noticed a lot of my students back when we were in person just didn't take notes in lecture. And I always found that kind of surprising, especially if I had slides, like the slides are never enough. So sometimes I've also noticed that students either take too many notes in addition to the students who just take no notes. And really neither of those is that great. So instead, kind of focusing on what seems to be really important, either in the lecture or in the readings that you're doing. So like highlighting a text and making notes in the margin, keeping an index card next to you while you read and take notes on the index card, where you maybe use more than one card per reading or leave it to one card. You might also have a full page of paper and just limit your notes to that one page of paper. But basically, you don't want to go overboard taking notes because that takes way too long. And then it becomes this big thing. And you're like, oh, homework's going to take forever when it really doesn't need to. Or you can even like use a dictation app or recorder app, or you can text yourself notes. I've actually done that when I've been doing reading, because sometimes that's the easiest and like least overwhelming thing to do. So finding ways to take notes, again, on both the readings and the lectures. In lectures, you don't have to transcribe the professor's lecture. You don't have to take like 10 pages of notes on each lecture or each reading, but instead kind of think about the highlights, what seems to be the stuff that the professor is really emphasizing, definitions, especially something that we repeat or say, over and over again, or kind of start the class off with and then end the class with, thinking about what's written on the board or what's, the diagram on the PowerPoint slide. Usually we don't flesh those things out. So your job is to kind of figure out what wasn't written out, to kind of fill in the gaps so that if you did just have access to the slides, a week later, and you see the slide says stare decisis, you know what stare decisis is, even though it's not, defined on the slide or there's no context for why you did it. Thinking about why we're studying what we are is really helpful. So thinking about like where a particular reading fits within the class or what the main point of the lecture is and how it relates to the larger message of the class. Those are some important things to do. And then finally, studying for your tests. When I was in my first teaching job, a student told me that they don't study for the midterm. They see what score they can get on the midterm, so they know how much to study on the final. And I was just kind of blown away by this. So I was like, that's a terrible strategy. Like you're gonna fail the class. So like, please study for your tests. Grades aren't the be all and end all, but like part of this is also just when you study for the test, that's when things click. That's when you kind of see the matrix and you're like, oh my God, everything makes sense now. I see how this impacts my daily life and how this helps me to like make sense of what's going on. For me, that was always the case. Like I, could sit through a lecture, took really good notes, did all the reading, but somehow when I was putting together my study guide, that's when I was like, oh my God, I get what the professor was saying. It's something about like the distance and kind of putting things together that really clicks. So studying for tests is really important, not just for the grade, but because that's where you're getting your bang for the buck. That's where you're learning. So how do you study for a test? Put together a study guide. And by what I mean by that is kind of create a document for yourself where it has the main important concepts, key terms, the theories, and examples from the class, as well as any kind of short summaries that you can come up with of the required readings. So sometimes professors provide kind of like a list of key terms and sometimes they don't. In some sense, it's kind of better if they don't because you have to go through and do the work of like figuring out what was important. And that again is like where you're really connecting the dots and you're doing that critical thinking of why did we talk about this thing? Why is this important? Was this just an example or is it an example that's really helpful for understanding this bigger concept that we spent like weeks talking about or a whole lecture talking about? So how do you tell if something is important? This drove me crazy when I was an undergrad. we'd have to like talk about the significance of something. I was like, I don't know what the significance of, can you tell me what it is? And it took me years to figure that out. It wasn't until I think I was a professor that I figured it out, like what the formula was. So like, you know, there's some easy things. Does it come up several times? Was it, you know, mentioned on more than one occasion, not just one lecture, but multiple lecture? Was it both in the reading and the lecture? You know, sometimes that's a key. Was it defined in the reading and the lecture, or one or the other? Did you get an example or two of it? So it's not just here's the definition, but also here's an example. Basically, did the professor spend a fair bit of time going over this thing in class, or was it something that you did a lot of reading on this particular thing? So those are some easy ways to kind of tell. But another one is to think about kind of boil down each reading or each lecture to 1 to 3 main points. Like what is the like we say, like the thesis of the reading or the thesis of the lecture. Or you can just think like what seemed to be kind of like the points that really stuck out during lecture that the professor seemed to be like really emphasizing. So you might start with the topic and then you say like, what was the professor or the author saying about that topic? So if I give you a reading on prisons, you can think like, well, what is it about prisons that we were talking about? And then you can think, how does this relate back to the class? How does this, you know, relate to the thesis of the class or to kind of the unit that we're in this class? Or how does this connect up to other things that we've talked about in the class? So some version of that. And then it also helps when you identify like those big points, you might think about what is this thing? Like just give a definition in your own words. What causes it if it's something that, you know, has causes? What evidence do we have for it that this phenomenon exists? And then why does it matter? Again, kind of thinking about how this relates to other things in the class. There's another strategy that's good, but it's a bit harder. And so especially if you're new to college classes, this might not be the best one. But again, it's how to think about how the course material fits together. And so kind of thinking about the big picture. I always tell my students, like, think about the big picture. So in one of my classes on criminal justice organizations, this class has a thesis, and the thesis is that it's helpful to think about criminal justice agencies like prisons, courts, as organizations. And so the class is organized around that argument. And so we go over like different organizational theories, and that helps us to make sense of these criminal justice agencies. And so each lecture is basically an example that leads back to that larger argument. And so one of the ways you could study for a test in that type of class is to kind of fit things together and see like what the connections are between them. And then finally, I just want to say, if you're struggling with these sorts of things, and I don't mean like, you know, you just have a lot on your plate, there's a lot of time, kind of, you have other responsibilities. I mean, like if you're trying to study and you're just having a really hard time, it's really worth talking to the Kokua folks on campus or talking to doctors off campus potentially. So neurodiversity, things like autism or ADD, like there's a huge range of different types of neurodiversity, but basically in a nutshell, if you learn differently than the average student, so that, you know, you might be kind of slipping through the cracks or like the standard advice doesn't work for you. So neurodiversity is an awesome thing, but it also just means that things can be extra challenging for you because, again, you're learning in a way that's different for other people. So the standard advice doesn't quite stick. And so you might feel extra kind of ashamed or like stupid because, you know, you're following the advice, but it's just not working. And so you're really kind of frustrated by that tension of like, but I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. If that's the case, it can be really helpful to get diagnosed and see if there's something going on that you didn't know about. And in fact, neurodiversity is super underdiagnosed. And so it's something that, like, even if you've gotten good grades in the past, people might think, oh, you don't have, you know, ADD or autism or whatever it is. But it can be really helpful to get diagnosed because that can help you to learn the appropriate strategies or get accommodations that help you to navigate school so you don't find yourself spinning your wheels and getting super frustrated. So those are my pieces of advice, and I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Kimura.
Right. Thank you so much. Talking about, I guess, neurodiversity, different learning styles, thinking the big picture. I like that as well. And also, yes, we may be very awkward to talk to, but please talk to us. We are craving for human interaction, and we love to talk to your students. Any comments from the speakers? Sort of something else that we popped up in your mind as listen to others? Anything else? Otherwise, any questions from the floor? Although I think we are already sort of past 15 minutes mark. And so what we will do is the speakers shared really helpful information. So we're going to curate those things, and hopefully we'll share on the website or the email to the students. And I hope that this event has been helpful for you, and wanting to see whether there are any questions, although I don't see it. So if you have sort of questions after the session ends, please do not hesitate to email us. My email is Kimura, K-I-M-U-R-A, @hawaii.edu. You can also email the department and they can forward the emails to, if you have specific questions to the speakers, they can do that as well. Now, I hope that this event has been helpful to you, and thank you so much for the 3 speakers. And we would really like the feedback from you. So if you have anything, questions, comments, please send that to us as well. But good luck for the rest of the semester, and I'll see you, hope many of you in the class. All right, thank you so much.